Let's start with the things you'll need for the shoot. First up, a gray card, an A clamp and some white foam board, a photography light of some sort, a tethering cable, a light stand, a camera, and a vinyl backdrop, or whatever backdrop you have. I'm using this white surface that I got from Replica Surfaces to kind of better hold my vinyl backdrop, just because the table that I'm shooting on is so small. Fun fact, I actually chose yellow because it's in the brand packaging, but also yellow is complementary to purple, so it worked out perfect. Next up, let's grab our tripod. Let's go ahead and set it up in the general vicinity, kind of the area we think it's gonna work. And as long as I don't drop my camera, that would be super sick. I love that. But we can go ahead and kind of get it into position, and we'll mess with this a little later, but right now that's a good spot for it. Next, I'm gonna grab that tethering cable and I'm gonna go ahead and plug that into my camera, and then I'll plug the other end into the laptop. Also, you don't have to use a tether cable. The screen on your camera is totally fine. I do this because it allows me to see what I'm shooting on my monitor and my laptop. If you're going to be doing more product photography, definitely look into the setup, but it's not a must-have for today's shot. Real quick, fit check. Okay, we're good. Let's go ahead and grab our light stand. This is a simple spreader from Manfrotto. Yeah, Manfrotto. And this is fine for these smaller lights. I wouldn't be too worried about it. You might get a little wobble, but you know, throw a sandbag or like a backpack on it if you're afraid of it tipping over. Now, I guess I didn't get good footage of this, but I set my color temp of this light to 5800 Kelvin. This is a bicolor light, and that matches the white balance in my camera, which is also set to 5800. So that's gonna save you some headaches in post-production. Just make sure that those 2 Kelvin temps match up. I'll raise this light up and I'm gonna angle it at about 45 degrees. That's generally a good angle to stick to. Now's a good point to turn your house lights off. Any lamps, overhead lights, anything like that, you don't want any of those lights influencing the scene. All right, let me walk back over to my camera here. Let's talk about camera settings. F13, want everything in focus, 1/200th of a second to reduce any accidental shake. And then my ISO, I like to keep that at 100, but this light's powerful, but it's not that powerful. So I'm having to boost it to kind of help that out a little bit. Here you can see me playing with the angle of the product, kind of figuring out which way I want that pattern to flow. Once I get that dialed in, I'm gonna go ahead and move my light around, because sometimes, you know, when you move the light and see it from a different angle, see how the shadows fall on the product, you realize, oh, it actually looks better over here, or a little bit lower, or a little bit higher. I highly recommend you experiment with this. You're so close to a good shot, sometimes you don't realize that moving the light an inch to the left or the right makes all the difference. Now, one light is great. 2 lights is even better, but we don't have 2 for this video, so I'm going to use that A-clamp and white foam board, and we're gonna bounce the light onto the other side of the product, which is gonna fill in the shadows and give us a more evenly lit product. I'm gonna take a second to frame up my shot, make sure it's centered, make sure everything's where I want it, and then we'll go ahead and take the shot and keep moving forward. Okay, this looks great. This is exactly what we want. If your photo looks like this, then you're doing it right. Now, I'm gonna take a few other shots because I'm doing another editing video where I'm compositing like 3 or 4 photos together, so have fun watching that. If you don't wanna watch it, just go ahead and skip to the end where we edit the photo. Alright, let's get to the good stuff, editing. One thing that I do need to mention is I'm going to edit in Capture One. If you're in Lightroom, which I know many of you are, that is not an issue. Everything we're doing here today translates over to Lightroom, so don't feel like you can't follow along. Alright, so we're going to take care of our base adjustments, things like white balance and exposure, and really the biggest piece of advice I can give you is to open your histogram panel and to pay attention to where those colors are on the histogram, because if they're pushing too far to the right, that's when you start losing detail and things look blown out. So if you can look at mine, that's kind of a good place to be, where it's in maybe a little bit of that 4th quadrant, like leaning over a little bit. I boosted my exposure just a touch. I've added some contrast because I want it to pop, be a little bit more punchy, and then I've boosted that saturation quite a bit, up to 40. I've brought my highlights down quite a bit. That's normal when you're shooting bare bulb or without like a softbox. Boosting the shadows because I want more detail. Whites I'll usually boost out a little bit, and then I'll bring those blacks back down to make sure we're keeping that contrast in the shadows after we boosted them. I thought the purple could use a little bit more of a saturation boost, so I targeted that color specifically, then cranked it up a little bit. Lastly, I added a 4x5 crop to my photos, and I'm going to open those in Photoshop. First thing we're going to do is clean the background, and I'm going to add a curves adjustment so that I can see those imperfections a little better. And then I'm just going to grab my clone stamp and healing brush, and I'm going to go through and fix those kind of glaringly obvious issues on the vinyl mat before we do anything else. Next, we'll run the Haas House retouching layout action. You do get that in the membership, so if you want to know more about it, check that out. But essentially, it's going to give you a structured workflow for retouching your photos. And if you don't know what frequency separation is, which is the first step that the layout gives you, just watch a video on it. It really deserves its own video. But essentially, it's just giving you a more targeted way to tackle complex textures within products and even people, and really get you some better results. But if you don't use it right now, or you're unfamiliar with it, you can just stick to clone stamping and healing brush on your packaging. You're going to get similar results, but it's just a little bit more elevated way to work. Next, I'm going to take care of the vignetting on the background, and I didn't quite catch this in Capture One because that yellow is so bright, but I'm going to use my helper layers here to help me better see this, and the black and white just makes it easier to see the transition from light to dark. So what I'm going to do is grab my mixer brush, I'm going to go to the color layer and frequency separation, and I'm just going to use that brush to push the light colors into the dark and make it more uniform. Alright, this is my favorite part of the edit, the dodge and burn section, because it adds so much value to the overall photo, and at its core we're just adding more contrast to the product, but we're doing it in a way that feels elevated. We'll start with the burn layer, and we're going to find those shadowy areas on the package and brush over them to make them a little bit darker and a little bit more contrasty.
Today's video is sponsored by me, Haas House. Feeling a bit lost? That's okay. You can just search dodge and burn techniques on YouTube, or you can sign up for the membership and watch me explain it in depth and show you my entire editing workflow. We have 45 editing tutorials, 25 downloadable PDF lighting guides, and you get the Haas House retouching actions, $39 a month. You can cancel anytime you like. Go check it out.
And then for the dodge layer, we'll do the same exact thing, but just for the bright points or the highlights on the product. And of course, here's the before and after. You can see what a huge difference this is making. Next up, we got color grading or color corrections, and I'm using a hue saturation adjustment, and I made a selection around just the background because if you look at it, it's a little warm like the yellow, so I'm trying to get it a little bit more closer to the Misfits yellow, which has a touch of green in it, and you can see me kind of nudging these sliders over a little bit. I'm also going to add a little bit more saturation just to kind of bring the vibrancy up and match the vibrancy of the package because we've added so much contrast to it at this point. I feel like the background needs a little love as well. Next, we're going to look at the side of the packaging because it's a little too red and there's a very easy way to target this. So I'm going to go ahead and make just a kind of crude selection around the side right there, and I'm going to bring up a selective color adjustment layer. Now, what this does is allows us to target the red specifically so that we can kind of add or remove any of these CMYK values and really bring it to match the rest of the packaging, or at least, take away some of the redness. And you'll see here I operate in the neutral, that was a dumb word. It's the right word, but it sounds silly. Anyways, I pull up the neutrals and I'm going to kind of target it from there as well. Again, so much more goes into this other than just playing around with the sliders, although you can do that and still get great results. All right, this is looking great. This is exactly what I wanted, to just remove some of the reds. Now, to make sure that our adjustment layer isn't affecting any other parts of the package, I'm gonna use my brush tool and kind of just brush out the edges of our selection and make sure that it's not affecting any other parts that might be considered red. Just kind of cleaning it up and making sure we're only targeting that little strip of red on the side there. Here's the before and after, and you can see just how warm that yellow was and then how much better this looks. All right, let's add a little bit more razzmatazz to this. So I'm gonna merge all onto its own layer, convert it to a smart object, and then we're gonna open up the Camera Raw editor, and I'm gonna do one more pass of like our exposure, highlights, shadows, all of that, and really make sure we're getting the most out of the image, paying attention to the histogram as well, making sure we're not blowing out and losing detail in the shadows or the highlights. And then, this is cool, so we go to the effects tab, and I'm gonna add a little bit of texture and a little bit of clarity, and that's gonna give it some of the crunch crunch. That's a very stylistic choice. You don't have to do this, but play around with it. Sometimes I use like 10, sometimes I use 50. It really depends on the photo and how much you can push it. Sometimes it looks terrible, so just if it does, just back off it, but you'll kind of find that sweet spot as you play around with it. All right, let's finish this out strong. We're gonna create the repeating pattern, and I'm gonna show you the simplest way to do this. Let's start by merging everything that we've done onto its own layer, and then we're going to select subject from the properties panel. And Photoshop does a good job, but you see here I have to grab the selection brush and kind of fill in that selection. We're going to go ahead and hit Command J to duplicate that selection onto its own layer, and then you can name that to keep things nice and tidy. And then we're going to come down here to the bottom and we're going to add a solid color adjustment, and we're going to choose the yellow that we've been working with. I'm actually going to turn this off for a second and then sample the photo color so that I can get that perfect yellow. Go ahead and select the layer with your bar on it, and now you can option drag a duplicate down below it, and you can see I'm just kind of option dragging, more duplicates and lining them up to get that kind of pattern that I want. I'm going for about the middle of the bar is where I want that negative space to be. And so once you have that, you can select all 3 of your bars and then option drag those, and it creates even more of the pattern. And then you can option drag again up, and you'll see how we have a little bit of space in the center. I'm going to go ahead and option drag the center bar by itself. I'll drag one to the left and up, and then I'll drag another copy down to the bottom right to fill in that little space. And that's going to be it. You have it. You've done it. Congratulations. You have a repeating pattern photo that you can now add to your portfolio, and you don't have to buy like 15 different bars to create it. If you want a step-by-step editing tutorial, check out the Haas House membership. I'm giving away a free month of membership to 3 different creatives. All you have to do is comment below to enter. I'll choose the winner next week. That's a wrap. Much love. I'll see you next time.